Cool, so let's get started. So, hello everyone, I'm Brian. I am the Senior Lifecycle Marketing Manager here at Meetup, and welcome to another Meetup Live event. Today we're joined by Maria Brito, who is the author of How Creativity Rules the World, the art and business of turning your ideas into gold. On Meetup Live, to hone into your untapped creativity, you'll leave this event with the skills to overcome limiting thoughts and develop practices to get you thinking out of the box and achieving unprecedented results. So to start off, we'll start by going over some guidelines and then the agenda. So this event will be recorded and you will not appear in the video. And then as a courtesy, the audio will be muted during the event. If you have questions, submit your questions in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And then later on in the event, we'll have time to answer some of those questions. And then closed captioning is available. To turn it on, click on the live transcription icon at the bottom of your screen and select your preference. And then for the agenda, so right now we're going through the introduction, and then we'll have a fireside chat with Maria, and that'll go for about 40 minutes. And then we'll have a Q&A session at the end to answer questions from the audience. So going into the introduction, thank you so much for joining us today, Maria. So Maria Brito is the award-winning New York-based contemporary art advisor, author, and curator. She's the author of the best-selling book, How Creativity Rules the World. She's a Harvard graduate, originally from Venezuela. Brito has been selected by Complex Magazine as one of the 20 power brokers in the art world. She was named by Art News as one of the visionaries who gets to shape the art world. And for several years, Maria has taught her creativity course in companies. And in 2019, she launched a Jumpstart, an online program for creativity for entrepreneurs based on years of research and observation in both the areas of business and art. Thank you so much for joining us today, Maria. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Thank you, Brian, for the intro, and everybody at Meetup for this great fun opportunity, and everybody who is here. I appreciate you and love you for being here, and especially people who are up in the middle of the night and in different continents. Thank you. Really, I send love and energy your way. Thanks.
So diving into the first question, can you tell us a little bit about your background, what initiated your passion for creativity and redefining creativity?
Well, you know, I was a corporate attorney for 9 years. I went to Harvard Law. I grew up in Venezuela, and that it was a very conservative family, very conservative environment. My parents couldn't figure out that if I was going to be a singer, a performer, which was what I wanted to do with my life, basically. And I had the talent for it, but when it became kind of serious and I started getting callbacks for touring bands and people from different record labels were calling, my parents said no, that there was no way I was going to do that. So they had already brainwashed me into all this kind of dependable career and fulfilling, I don't know what kind of destiny that they thought for me. I mean, I don't think they meant to hurt me. I think they didn't know any better, especially coming from a place where they didn't believe there were any other options. So I did go to law school, and in the process, I also left the country, which was a blessing in disguise. And I practiced as a corporate attorney in New York City for 9 years. And I progressively hated it more and more, because at the beginning, you're young, you just left law school, you're filled with dreams. New York is an incredible city, and you're making money and you feel like you're on top of the world, but the truth is you're not at the top of the world, because you're pretty much losing your life in front of a computer and dedicating 16 hours a day to someone else's business, basically. And I got pregnant, and I got married, I got pregnant, and when I was pregnant, I was already negotiating with myself what was going to be my next move, because I just could not tolerate that anymore. I didn't mind the money. I just couldn't. And I have been an enthusiast and a passionate, art collector and art connoisseur ever since I was a child. Actually, I was into the arts, and my parents did not want me to pursue anything in the arts, but they loved to take me to museums and to art fairs and to galleries. And so I had a very solid on the go training. And I traveled the world with them so that we could go and see all these amazing things in person, the Louvre or the Sistine Chapel and things like that. So after collecting some art and telling my friends what art to buy, a lot of my friends told me, you do have a great eye for aesthetics, and you also recognize talent early on. This was pre-Instagram, pre the times where people found things online and everything was available for them. So I said to myself, well, I could be an art advisor. What does an art advisor do? So basically, I am the eyes and ears of art collectors around the world who hire me to build their art collections, to help them gain financial value, but also things that have to do with who they are. It has to match their lives, their aesthetics, the thing that they're interested into. And so it's a very, very dynamic and interesting work, because I not only get to work with these incredible clients, but I also get to work with galleries, gallery owners, and the artists, who are the most incredible people ever, because they live in the world of possibility. Basically, artists have some ideas in their minds, and they go to their canvases and they put them out there, or they go and create videos, or they do NFTs, or they sculpt something, or they create an installation. So they are always inventing worlds that are not real world, but they are, if you think about it, because they somewhat become a material piece, in the world. So I set out to redefine a lot of these ideas of creativity in my book, because I think it is the most important skill that any human being can actually have. And why is that? It's because while I work in the arts, I run a business. And so that's the most important thing, right? Like, you have to disassociate that the ideas that I have for you today can be applied to any business and any career. It can be if you're a dentist, or if you're a graphic designer, and even if you're a lawyer, because you have to market yourself and do things in a way that you get to stand out in a sea of millions of other lawyers. So what the proper concept of creativity that we're going to talk about today is your unique ability to come up with ideas of value that can be materialized and realized, right? Because if I have ideas in the mind that I am going to create the first flying car, but I have no way how to do that, what's the point, right? It's more like I have ideas for my business, and I have ideas on how to keep making noise in my marketing, or how to keep growing my revenues, where to find all the clients, what other areas I can actually penetrate that are adjacent to mine. And so I want you guys to be super open-minded about these ideas, because while, again, my examples sometimes relate to art, they are not just for art. And I wanted to make that super crystal clear in my book. And that's why I make a lot of parallels between entrepreneurs and artists, because their creative process, even proven by scientists who have been researching these topics and watching the creative process of artists and entrepreneurs or scientists, is exactly the same. It doesn't vary. What varies is how you utilize it.
I love that answer. And I'm taking a ton of mental notes, because a lot of this stuff, like, I just love it. And I love the thing that you said with like creators, and it's like they live in like the life of possibility. And I think that kind of brings us into this next question, is like, what inspired you to write your book, How Creativity Rules the World, and like the different creativity workshops you conduct, and like, what was there a spark that's inspired that?
Well, the book came out of the course, right? The online course was a desire that I had to, because a lot of people came to me throughout. I've been doing this 13 years, and the first time I had the course up was maybe 3.5 years ago or so. And a lot of people came to me and said, I want to understand how you go from a corporate attorney to this art world superstar. How do you build a business that is 7 figures with like minimum amount of capital, and like your overhead is minimal and everything, right? And those questions came over and over again. And I said, look, let me just kind of like explain to people that it's all about the ideas. It is all about creativity. And that's the most important thing. First, I mean, yes, you have to be persistent, you have to be determined, you have to hustle, you have to do a lot of things. But if you don't have the concrete ideas, it's like you're nowhere, right? Like, I mean, you have to have the ideas that actually are viable. So I decided to put together that course to give business people and artists an into the process of creative thinking. And it's not just about me, how I did things, but I draw from history, from studies. I also interview a lot of professors from Ivy Leagues, universities. I talk to a lot of researchers. I talk to a lot of doctors, neuroscientists, because I was obsessed with this idea that if I had done it sort of like intuitively and following also the ideas that I had learned from artists, I wanted other people to learn about that too. And the results for my students were so incredible, outstanding, that I said, well, if, how can we do this so that it reaches more people, right? And still give people value in the sense of, there is a little bit of history in my book. There is a little bit of entrepreneurship. There's a little bit of business, marketing, science. And so what actually inspired the book was the pandemic, because I saw myself busy, but not as busy. I used to be once a month somewhere outside of the US and, traveling. And so that stopped. And I saw also the incredibly pivotal moment that the pandemic meant for the world, societally, emotionally, and in terms of opportunities, and like getting rid of the past, sort of like moving into a whole other world, whether that is a world of a lot more technology and metaverses and NFTs and things like that, or that is a world where people kind of stepped into the spaces where they feel that they can grow and do their own thing. And there's no coincidence that we have seen this phenomena of the Great Resignation, because people were leaving and still are leaving their jobs in droves because they just want to be happy doing things that are fulfilling. And there is nothing more fulfilling and exciting than seeing your ideas come to reality and making money out of them, because that is really the ultimate high and thrill that people can actually experience, whether that is your book, or you're a freelancer and you're selling your services, or you're an artist, or you're just like having your new business and people are coming. And that to me is the ultimate high. Really. So I wanted to give people this tool, this book, where they are like, oh, I feel inspired by history, because if it worked for Da Vinci and it works for Elon Musk, it might work for me. Yet we're not them. That's the other thing, right? Like, I mean, but people might say, well, but I'm not them. Yeah, sure, you're not them, neither, but the thing is, these things work. You just, again, it's like you have to be in the open-mindedness, that with commitment, because there's nothing like, oh my God, I just, I'm an overnight success and I am an overnight millionaire, get, rich quick scam. No, none of that is in my book and on my philosophy either. But there is always the beginning of something when you trust that you can bring your ideas to the market and to reality and monetize them. So there is always that seed, that spark is very, very important. And that's where creativity starts. It all starts with a vision.
And kind of diving into that too, like kind of like diving into like dispelling like these past myths, like how do people typically come up with their creative ideas, and what techniques are you teaching instead?
Yes, well, like the mythology of creativity is that either is inherited, that is something that you got in your genes, which is not true. There are absolutely no studies. If that would be the case, then Picasso's sisters would be Picasso's, like most famous painters, or like Madonna's 8 siblings will all be singer. That's not true. There's no genetic code that gets passed on creativity. The other thing that is a myth too is that it only happens to a handful of lucky people, right? Like, oh my God, Steve Jobs yes, Steve Jobs was one Steve Jobs. There's no more Steve Jobs, but there are things that people can do because creativity is not one thing. When you say somebody's creative, it's not just creativity. I want to make sure you guys understand that difference. But when somebody applied correctly, and it can be applied correctly to a corporation, anything you do means that it's an amalgamation of skills. So what are those skills? For example, the ability to have a the ability to bring skills, background, right? But there is so much value in the way you see things and the way you perceive certain parts of what you do. And I would consider experts, each one of you here, in what you do. So you already have whatever it is inside of you to the outside is very, very important. So trust your authenticity. So that having that confidence is very important for creativity. And the ability to take a risk, it's also very important, because nothing venture, nothing gained. You have to understand that being willing to take a risk also comes with the possibility that you may fail. So failure is a whole chapter in my book, because that means that you went far. And that means that you are experimental. That means that you're trying new things all the time. If you haven't had a failure in a long time, you're failing already, because that means you aren't taking chances and enough risks for you to see some big project come to fruition or some big leap. And it is important you train yourself to embrace failure and embrace risk taking. So part also of the problems that we see, why people don't come up with more ideas all of the time, is because there is a lack of attention. And this is a very important topic that I discuss in my book, that we are, since the internet took over our lives, and we're talking maybe about 15 years, right?
Mhm.
I mean, there was internet before, but we were not always it was a confluence of events, right? It was internet, social media, and the smartphones. When all that came together, we absolutely lost our ability to pay attention to things, because that is, I mean, it's a wonderful thing. I love social media. I love my iPhone, fine. But what it happened to us and to our brains is that we are consistently losing our focus, because we have an enormous source of fun, entertainment, distractions, and whatever that is keeping us fed with what that thing wants, right? It's not what, I mean, yeah, the algorithm feeds you what you normally would like check and whatnot, but it doesn't allow you all the time to have your brain in paying attention mode. And when that happens, you miss a lot of the things that are happening. They miss a lot of things that are happening in the periphery, because the periphery is where the best ideas are. And how do you do that in your life is, first of all, you have to pay attention. You have to have less technology. You have to practice mindfulness, right? Mindfulness is that art of being here and now, and not too far ahead in the future to the here and now. Meditation is an incredible tool for that. And obviously separating yourself from technology for like extended periods of time. I don't know, that means a very specific thing for each one of you, whether it is an hour a day, 2 hours a day, or a whole weekend. I don't know. That's all up to you. But try to separate yourself from technology and have pockets of time to think. So when I was talking about the periphery and the intersections, those are very, very important things for you guys to consider, because that's where the most incredible ideas for business or for art are. And if you think about great brands and big companies right now, like Facebook or Airbnb, Airbnb was at the margins of the hotel industry, right? I mean, it's like nobody sort of like understood very well how this could take off, and then it did, right? Uber was at the margins of the taxi industry and was like a little dream, a little app, and how do we do this? And then, you know, raising capital and things like that. So everything that is happening in the margins is very, very important. What are your kids playing? What are your nephews, nieces, what are the kids doing? You know, what is happening that is not mainstream yet? For example, all this world of metaverses and whatever, you know, augmented reality, it's not mainstream. I mean, 90% of the people don't even understand what's going on with that. So that's an incredible opportunity for you guys to research it, to get yourself acquaintance with like what's going on there and how people are going to monetize this, or how it's going to be fun to be in a metaverse. You know, what is happening with cryptocurrencies. I'm not saying go and buy crypto and get crazy. I'm saying document yourself, because you're not always going to succeed every time you're going to look into these intersections of margins. But what you're definitely going to get is an expanded perspective that can bring ideas to your own business and your own world and your own career, so you can utilize them in what you do. And that is how you start exploring all these margins and intersections. So I always do like a little test to see if an idea is worth exploring, and it's not just a fad. So when you happen to see something that is happening in the margins and that is not mainstream, let's say, for example, the metaverse, right? So is that something like the first test I made it go through is this living at the intersection of different industries, right? So that it has reach. So yes, it lives in the intersection of technology, it lives in the intersection of social media, it lives on the intersection of you know, perhaps different industries that, you know, maybe it is fashion or maybe it is art. So it touches a lot of different industries. The second part of the test is I ask if that new trend or that new thing makes people take action. So yes, because, you know, people are going to go and they are going to take a look, they're going to enter, you know, a space with software and hardware that's going to make them enter into a new dimension, if you will, whatever it is, because we don't know exactly how it's going to look like. And the third thing is asking if that movement that is at the intersection of different things and makes people take action also fulfills a human need, right? And so what are the human needs? The need of belonging, the need of being a part of something, the need of being respected, the need of being loved, you know, those are the basic human needs. And so once you have like take, you know, the 3 check marks of those things, then I would definitely go and explore it deeply, because that means that it has a staying power.
And the more you do this, it's more ideas just coming in, like unique viewpoints, new perspectives.
Absolutely.
And then also, like you said, like some of them will be dead ends, but like failure is good. Like you're gonna,
and you have to accept that from the get-go, right? Like you're going to encounter a lot of failures, you're going to encounter a lot of roadblocks and a lot of things that will never, you know, pay off what the effort you put in, but that is the path of being a creative person, really. And love it. And I think it's super cliche, like, but I'm gonna just say it. Like Steve Jobs used to say, you know, fail fast and fail often, because it was about experimenting and bringing those ideas to market. Of course, he could say that because he was Steve Jobs and he had a big team at Apple. But I think there is so much true into that, that, you know, you have to think about that constantly.
mm-hmm. And then, so yeah, you shared a lot on how like creativity positively can impact like a business, your career, like kind of flipping that. How can creativity positively impact like your everyday life? And like,
well, I think that you want to be always you. Mm-hmm. And like, you know, you're gonna have every day to make a million of decisions, right? And you're gonna have to also try to, depending on what your life is and what you want, either you want to optimize your resources, you want to be a better parent, or you want to be a better cook, or you want to stand out and be looked at, creativity is something that, again, it's all about the exploration of the authentic self when you bring it out, right? And how you actually do everything, because it's all like, once you start doing things in this way that is intentional, I think it trickles down in every part of your life. And you want to be whatever you are. I mean, if you're an introvert, then you just want to be you, and you want to be able to resolve the problems that show up in your life by respecting who you are. If you're funny, you want to be able to bring that also to the world, and to be known for that and your wittiness, right? So that those are things that I consider to be so important as a creative person, right? I mean, and for problem solving every day, it's important, because again, like, you're going to find so many things that happen, right? Like, a pipe bursts, or, something happens in your house, or you have a problem with the ATM and it eats up your credit card and things like that, right? So from the very mundane, you can turn those situations to your advantage if you're creative.
It's like growing your creative confidence, and like living, like the more you do it, like it just,
and
like
finding solutions that you didn't see before, right? For anything, for your marriage, for how you parent your kids, right? I mean, it takes a lot of creativity to parent kids, because you have to always negotiate with them. You have to tell them things that are, interesting and compelling. And it's not the same thing that over and over that they have heard, right? So you have to come up with new ideas to talk to them, and so that they hear you, right? At all the stages. I mean, a toddler, and like, a middle grade, and like a teenager. So all these things are very, very important.
Yeah, it's like the world isn't predictable every day. You might see something totally new.
There's nothing predictable. I think that if, like, the past 2 years have taught us, is that we cannot do anything about predictability.
Right. So are there any other habits, actions, kind of tools that people can use to utilize their creativity?
Yes, I think that I mentioned briefly meditation. I think if you're not into that and it sounds too woo to you, the practice of spending time alone and in complete silence is incredibly important for creativity, because it's like, I consider that to be the showers for the brain, right? Like, I mean, we wash our bodies every day. We should do the same with our brains. And we are way too stimulated. There is too much going on. And people just jump out of bed and get their phones and roll with the day. And they don't leave those phones and things, and, until like midnight when they go back to sleep. So I consider, it's actually, I quoted all the studies in my book to how these moments of silence are the precursors for creativity to happen, because you don't necessarily come up with your aha big things or, groundbreaking ideas when you are in silence, but you prime your brain for those moments to happen more often. And you absolutely have to do that if you do want to see an abundance of ideas pouring in. And the other thing is, try to look for things outside of your industry. I think that a lot of people confuse creativity with being, the hyper specialist. And you have to be a little careful with that, because the hyper specialist becomes so efficient that starts making assumptions that are not true, and starts looking at places that are just familiar and not the unfamiliar places. And so the greatest and most groundbreaking ideas always come from looking outside of your industry. They are not going to come from all the trade magazines and all the conferences that are hyper specialized, unless you are, even if you are a doctor, like as a physician and a neuroscientist, whatever. Those people still say that they find their most groundbreaking ideas when they are looking at opera or ballet, or they are, reading a novel, or they, because it's all about associative thinking. Creativity is all about associative thinking, right? And so you have to spread your interests quite well and look. Even sometimes you might not be that interested in an industry, but you should go and explore all the things, because self-contained, super pure is never creative.
Yeah, and especially like if someone's never experienced something, like they like might not even know that they love that. Like they'll discover something completely new about themselves too. And
Yes.
those connections that they make there.
That gives them opportunities to explore new parts of themselves and
Yeah.
and of markets, of industries. That's very cool too, because you don't know what's gonna be. And you also have chances to adapt what's in other spaces to what you do, which is fantastic. I think that's great. Like, oh my God, they do this in a restaurant or in the hospitality industry. Could I bring this to Meetup, right? Like, could I bring this to how we do things in this type of spaces?
Exactly. And then the community and connection are so important to our members and our organizers on Meetup. Can you share kind of how as a community we can help others unleash their creativity?
Well, I mean, communities are, first of all, creativity is always starts individually, right? But community
Right.
is how you actually express it after, right?
Mhm.
And I think that when people form teams or they are in group settings, the most important thing is to be empathetic and to see other people's points of view and try to be on those other points of view shoes, because we have had so much polarity and polarization in the past few years that we also have been losing our ability to empathize with others. And this is a terrible thing for creativity, right? And so the point of community, honestly, is yes, we do have shared interests, but we also are different. And empathy is one of the most valuable things that anybody can possess, because it allows you to see so many different perspectives and not just yours. So it's almost like everything goes full circle, as I have been trying to convey here, that it has to be a lot of different points of view and a lot of different industries and a lot of different fields for something to be really groundbreaking and creative. So the power of community is outstanding as long as you're willing to take other people's points of view. And I know that is really hard. So I would recommend that try to sometimes get into conversations with people that you absolutely can't understand how you can have a common point with them, just because it'll really help you open up your own. You don't have to be convinced of the other person. You don't have to change parties or, change religions or anything, but you just have to really be willing to have the conversation, because one of the worst things that can happen, not only for creativity but overall, is to be so biased in favor of what you think that you will miss every other opportunity for growth, like, and everything else.
I love that. Yeah, like one answer for like a question like that you come up with as an idea like might solve it for yourself and like the few people that you talk to, but like the more people you talk to, the more connections and patterns that you kind of realize that
Absolutely.
that initial idea might not solve the problem for.
And everybody has a different point of view, right? So you may have 10 different points of view, and kind of mixing them all together, you may find the best solution. And that's always amazing.
So kind of going through a lot of the different like topics that we covered, are there any habits that you found like most helpful for yourself, like to like start with as like people kind of start exploring this like idea of creativity?
Well, I think that in between silence and spending time alone, writing your thoughts and with pen and paper has been proven to be a whole lot more conducive to incredible breakthrough ideas than typing on a computer or on your phone. And it's because there are certain neurons in parts of the brain that get activated when you hold a pen in your hands and you go on the paper and you also spend time in the moment, which when you're typing, sometimes people are great typers or typists, and they can be like, oh, I'm just looking out the window, like, or whatever, looking at a TV, and it's not the same level of attention. But when you actually take the time to write, longhand, lots of ideas in your notebooks. A lot of people do this when they wake up. It's a habit that was documented for the first time by this surrealist artist in the early 1900s. And they call it automatic writing because the surrealists were interested in exploring dreams, and they were fascinated by Freud, which was at the time a young psychiatrist with all this crazy ideas. So they were following whatever Freud said and adapting things. So they said, well, the only way to really capture our dreams is that the minute we're up, we have this notebook by our beds and we have the pen, and we're just going to spend 15 minutes filling out the pages, like writing stream of conscious, and like that actually works really well. So if anybody is into that type of thing, you can come up with a lot of ideas that way, but you have to allow yourself to do it for at least 90 days, because I hate to put pressure on like how much, but that's the truth. You have to establish a routine. You have to establish a practice. I also wrote in my book that a habit, for the minimum, for a habit to be fully established, it takes 66 days. And it's been also proven by science. So if you want anything to show results in your life, it's not a get rich quick, it's not a one thing, and I like to really say that. Creativity, great ideas, success takes persistence, takes time, takes determination, but it is within everybody's reach. I can attest to that. I can say that for sure.
That's awesome. Yeah, like it's kind of going back to like the writing thing. There's this quote that I really like. It's like, I'm not writing it down to remember it later. I'm writing it down to remember it now. And I think that's like kind of goes, and it's like bringing everyone back to like the present when,
yes,
like, so like
absolutely.
that.
And also like you want to catch the thought now, right? Like you want to catch it now, and you want to remember it now, and you want to be in the present now. And then later when you read those notes, you may have a completely different perspective.
Right. And then one other question. So do you think that like one habit works better than another for a specific field, or is it they all kind of work together?
No, they all work. I think that the silence is like vital, absolutely vital for everybody. But I think that the way I see these things, that they work for me and they work for others, my students and the artists and entrepreneurs that I know, is that they make use of them as needed be, right? Like, so some days you are feeling more like you want to write. Some days you feel that you really want to be in meditation. Some days you want to go and be a tourist in your own life, which I love to, right? It's like, take a completely different route to work or to do the things, the errands that you normally do, and pay attention also to what's happening in those new streets. What are you actually picking up on, right? Or go to the pharmacy and go to an aisle where you typically pick up things, whether it is shampoo or whatever, and pay attention to new packaging, new ingredients, new brands, because I'm sure you go in and out and you just grab what you need and then you're like, I'm out, right? And then you're missing out on seeing trends and seeing things, because things don't happen in isolation, right? If you see that everything is like green or pink, or they talk about organic, or they talk about, new lavender, why is this replicated so many times, right? I would be curious to know why lavender is being used in all these things, right? Or why every time I'm, pay attention to the things that are offered at the end by the cashier, because usually those things have, people want to pick them on a whim. So take a look at those things and say, why, if it's like, if it's your typical chocolate, okay, well, they didn't bring anything new, but there's usually a ton of things there to pay attention to and to think. And so live your life with awe and wonderment. And I promise you, like, if you start living your life like a child, like, I'm a mother of 2 kids, they are already 14 and 12, and they're still very curious. But, I think about when they were little, everything they would touch, everything they would open, everything was like up for grabs, because that's how a child sees the world. And the most creative people really live like children.
That's awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for just a taste of all of these different ideas. And I know
they're helpful.
Yeah, no, they are. And and kind of transitioning, all these ideas are kind of you dive in deeper in your book. And I think we have a slide to share, kind of diving into that too. Yeah. We actually have an offer right now too, where $5 off your book, How Creativity Rules the World, the Art of Business of Turning Your Ideas into Gold. And I think the link is going to be dropped in the chat for all the different people in this joining us today. Can click into that link and kind of dive into these ideas more and really awaken their creativity.
Absolutely. And I hope, I know these things work. At the end of the book is very, very actionable, because at the end of each chapter, there is a whole world of exercises and practical prompts and ideas. I call them alchemy labs, because I think that everybody's an alchemist with all the ideas that they have inside waiting to be turned into gold. So what's fun about this book, and that has been praised by the readers, is that it has the exact amount of exercises and practical ideas at the end, so that you can implement what you learn in the chapter itself, right? That I said before, it mixes history and science and some of my own experiences and my observations with artists and entrepreneurs, and then goes into the practical aspect. So it is very, very actionable, and you will turn this book into an alive part of yourself and your creativity if you dive very deeply into those exercises, and they are really, really fun.
That's so exciting. I can't wait to dive into this book as well. And then, so I think now we have some time for Q&A from the audience, and I have some questions here that have been submitted throughout the conversation. The first one is from a member. They said, I have a similar story. I'm a physician who wanted a creative arts career. And then, did Maria get an education or degree in art?
No, I didn't. I went straight from the law firm to open this. As I mentioned before, I had a lot of on-the-go training with my parents and grandparents, who took me to every museum and every gallery, every artist studio, not only in Venezuela, but around the world. And when I moved to New York, New York is the center of contemporary art in the world. I immediately, as I moved to New York, I started collecting art. So that meant that was nothing available online. I had to go to places. I had to shake hands with people. I had to look for myself. And I started forming my own criteria and building my network, as I went with life.
Mm-hmm. And then another question from an anonymous person is, for me, creativity and ideas are not a problem. Coming from the kids' business, I have so many ideas, and I need help making them happen. Do you have any suggestions to help with that?
Yes. The second part, so my book is structured in 4 parts. The second part of my book is all about materializing, right? And also, I think it's important when you come up with, so here's the thing, right? And that's what I said before. The idea is to be if I think that I can have a flying car, which will be amazing, that's an amazing idea, but it's not relevant because I can't make it happen, right? Mm-hmm. So when you have ideas, the first thing you have to do is evaluate them and see what is the likelihood that this can happen for me. If I need to raise $1 million for them to happen, can I do that? Can I put together because there are so many resources for free on the internet, right? Like, what do I need to do to raise $1 million? I'm just saying, I don't really know what your ideas are, right? Like, oh, okay. So then you go and then you Google that up and says, okay, you have to draft a business plan. Oh, you type again, business plan template. Okay. So then you fill out, okay, so then what's the step 2? Okay, contact angel investors. Where do I find angel investors? So then the step 2 is like, okay, there are like websites actually where you can register and find angel investors when you put your ideas up there for grabs and whatever, right? So I don't know what your ideas are, but I think that you find the solution to ideas that are plausible and executable by actually taking action. And that's the most important thing that I can give to anybody who has a lot of ideas and never makes them happen, or has a hard time materializing them, is that ideas die as ideas. If you know what I mean. Like, ideas happen only when you take action and you propel the idea forward. And you are the owner of that idea, and you are the one who has to. And it's okay to be ambitious, but it's not okay to be so ambitious that they are unrealizable, because then it's frustrating. So if that's your problem, because the ideas are so impossible, like, then perhaps you have to adjust them to reality. But without having a full, kind of landscape of what's happening to you, it'll be hard for me to give you the best advice.
Kind of going from there too, Lillian asked, I have multiple artistic passions. Do you have any advice on how to focus on one at a time?
I think that it depends on what you want to do with them. Like, if they're artistic passions or things that you want to monetize, then I would always go with one that you're better at, right? I mean, because that's the low-hanging fruit in a way. And if you're great at it, then other people are going to see that too, right? Now, if you have multiple artistic passions for your enjoyment and it's not a business thing, I would say that go with the one that makes you happier. I always think, and this is also a principle that I follow in my business, since I left the career of a lawyer because I hated it, I have had many different, not iterations of my business, but like divisions or projects or ventures. And the minute I start feeling that doesn't give me joy, because for whatever reason, I start considering chopping it off, right? Like, we've had, because you don't go from happy to unhappy in 1 second. It's like a variety of things that happen along the way, right? So when I see that there is an accumulation of unhappiness in a particular area of my business, I say, well, you're gonna have to die, because I can't really afford to be unhappy in a career that I invented for myself. So that's my idea on how to capitalize or how to go with what you want in like your multiple passions.
That's awesome. That kind of relates to this next question from Tim. He asked, how do you best identify what your creative strengths are, and are they rooted in what we can discover we're most passionate about?
There's a lot of discussion about purpose. There is a lot of discussion about intuition and what your intuition is. I think you have to be very honest with yourself and ask questions to your intuition too, because at the end of the day, we are equipped with intuition. It's not woo-woo. It's not just new wave and craziness. We do have a sixth sense that obviously has gotten very untrained by media, by formal education, standardized tests, and all those things. So I would ask in silence, in a meditative state, when you're very calm, what are your biggest talents and what are your biggest strengths? And I would wait for the answer, not immediately, but something that hits you as a hunch at a certain point. And I would also ask people. This is very important. I would ask friends or family who are close and have their best interest at heart. And so I think that those are your best bets.
That's awesome. Yeah, Sandra asked, what are some creative ways to brighten up everyday life in terms of routines?
Well, look, I mean, it depends, right? I mean, are you a person who likes motion, right? Because exercise, dance, being engaged with your body, yoga, whatever, those are very important things that brighten your life by being creative, right? I mean, I would say, like, writing, as I said before, keeping a journal is important. If you want to have, I have a whole set of prompts in my book, but if you want to have a journal of serendipities, that's so cool, right? Like writing down things like, oh my God, I was thinking about Jane and she called me, or I was thinking about 11:11 when I looked my phone, it was 11:11, or things like that. That's a very fun way to keep like your creativity, because you have to go every time and like fill up the journal or whatever. Or you can keep a journal of like gratitude, right? Or happy moments too. You can go to galleries and museums. For the most part, galleries are free everywhere, so you don't have to spend money on that. Like, so you can have like one day of the week, you say, okay, it's Wednesday, I'm gonna take, from 5 to 6 or 5 to 7 p.m. and I'm gonna go and I'm gonna hit the galleries in town, right? Or I'm gonna go once a month or twice a month. I'm going to go to, and I'm going to spend the money, the fee to get into a museum. Or like, I don't know where you are, but I would assume for most of the things, the names of places that I saw before, most people live in urban locations. Spend time in nature also is a cool way to like reconnect with creativity. And, I think that you can find many incredible fun things to do every day. Take a different route to work, like I said before. Be a tourist in your own life. Go visit places that you have never been. Take a different route to work, or go to like exotic restaurants. That's such a cool thing if you can do that, right? I mean, it's like if you're always having this type of food, go and find the strangest thing that is available in where you live, and take that chance and see what happens, and ask questions to the chef and be curious. I think that we also have lost the ability to be curious and ask questions for the sake of really wanting to nurture your soul and have a thirst for knowledge. This is so important. It's a repeated and constant quality that is free, that is in every creative person you will ever meet, ranging from Da Vinci to Shonda Rhimes. Like, they are all curious. They want to know. They want to ask questions. They have passion for human beings. So that will brighten your life no matter what. I mean, I love podcast hosts because they talk to everybody all the time, and it's such a fun way to get to know others, right? And they really spread their interests, and they go after great different people. So I think that that's a long list that will, hopefully you will find 2 or 3 things there to do.
That's awesome. Yeah, we have time for 1 or 2 questions. There's a question from Antonio on, can creativity be a tool that they can also use in their everyday relationships?
Yeah, absolutely. I said it before. I mean, I think that the way that you present yourself, the way that you talk to your partner or your boss or your kids, the way you sell your ideas to those people, right? I mean, you can extraordinarily be creative and that's the most important thing, really. You want to be you want to be one of a kind. You want to be remembered for being this original person who has this cool way. You want to be memorable, right? You want to be the person who comes and says things that nobody says. You want to ask the questions that nobody asks. You want to relate to people in a way that everybody remembers, because you are unique and you come up with this incredibly great ideas, these great lines, so absolutely.
That's awesome. Yeah. And then one last question from Susan. She asked, what if they've abandoned a creative project in the past and want to return to it, but they feel fear or apprehension about picking that up again?
Well, so I want you to make sure that if you want to go back to the project because you left something unresolved, or because you think that there is gold in that project, those are like different types of goals. Because if it's something that failed and it's dead and there's no revival, I'm not sure you should go there, right? But if there is curiosity, love, intrigue, and you think that there are opportunities that this can be, if it's something that fell in the past because their conditions were not right, you have to be able to put that through that test, right? Sometimes things have to be stored for a little bit until the conditions are right. And the conditions might be your conditions, might be the world, might be the money, it might be where we are, etc. So you have to be able to put things through this different tests to know, right? I mean, do you want to go back to something because you feel vengeful? Then no, right? Like, I mean, that's like, I don't think that's like a good motivation to have. Do you want to go back to something because you feel that you need to complete something? Then definitely go back and check it out again, right? I mean, and look at the face of that fear. What is that fear telling you? Is that fear saying something to you that has to do with who you are, with who you were? Is the fear because of what people are going to think? In which case, I think it should be discarded, because at the end of the day, people just, people are preoccupied with their own selves, not with you, right? So.
That's great. Thank you so much for joining us all today. And thank you so much, Maria, for your time. This has been.
Yeah, thank you, Brian, and the whole Meetup team and everybody who stayed here this long. You guys are wonderful. I hope to have given you a lot of value. I hope I did, and a lot of great how-tos and ideas. And, feel free to get the book. There's a lot there to be digested and to be implemented in people's lives.
Awesome. And before we go, there's a few slides I'd like to share just to wrap up. And so the first slide is all about becoming a Meetup organizer and finding others who share your interests. Today you can save 30% on your first subscription by going to meetupsavings.com. And this is a great way to just like act on those different ideas that you have of creating a group and creating that community. Then the next slide, if you're looking for other ways to just see different insights, different interviews, we launched our podcast, Keep Connected with Meetup CEO last year. So you can take out your phone and you can scan the QR code, and that'll bring you to the podcast where you can see all the different episodes of our CEO interviewing different people and pulling in different insights. And then lastly, as a reminder, you can view the recap of this event in a few days on our Community Matters blog at meetup.com/blog. And thank you again for joining us, everyone. Stay safe. And thank you again, Maria, for your time.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, everybody. It's a pleasure. Thank you.